Are you like me and you're one of those mommies that have perpetual mommy guilt? Today we have our expert, Michelle Maiden, on the show, and she's going to talk about nurturing your well-being as a parent and working through that guilt that just never seems to go away. There's not enough attention given to this person. We're spending too much time on that. Today we're going to talk about how we deal with these things and what are some tips and tricks to help us as mommies or parents, if you are a man, doing the best that we can and making the best decisions that we can and being as kind to ourselves as we can. I look forward to the show. I don't know if I can take it anymore.
When you are depressed, you don't want to get out of it.
It's so hard today.
You don't want to be bothered with anyone.
I don't have any
But
motivation.
overcoming depression is going to require that you get up and engage with life again.
All I want to do is sleep.
When you are feeling down, the worst thing you can do
The last thing
is
I want to do is
isolate
hang out
yourself.
with my friends.
Because isolation actually intensifies sadness.
I don't think this will ever
So
go
I
away.
recommend finding a distraction that will shift your energy.
I need somebody to help me. Welcome to the Mental Health Podcast with your host, Barbie Moreno. And today my guest is Dr. Michelle Maidenberg, and she just released a book called Ace Your Life. Hi, Dr. Michelle. How are you?
Hi, so nice to be here. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. So before we start talking about our lovely subject today, can you give us the full name of your book and kind of a summary or synopsis of it?
Sure. So it's called Ace Your Life, Unleash Your Best Self and Live the Life You Want. And the reason why I use the word unleash very purposefully is because I feel like we have all of this wonderful intrinsic, humanness within all of us that sometimes just has to be unleashed. I think about us as sculptures. There's this beautiful piece of marble, and then once it's cultivated and sculpted, right, you see your beauty and your essence. And sometimes it's hidden because it's hidden in our subconscious or unconscious, right? And we don't really have the ability sometimes to show ourselves. So so I use a model, which I made up, which is called ACE, and it's predicated under acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. And the book is called Ace Your Life, Unleash Your Best Self and Live the Life You Want. So the way that I structured it was the first chapter is on our thinking, because I think it's so important to have an understanding and a psychoeducation on our brain and our minds and our thinking, to really understand, our functioning. And then the second is on our values, because a lot of my work is value-based. And then acceptance, compassion, empowerment, what I did is I split it because there are so many factors and barriers that keep us from tapping into our acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. So I first talk about the barriers, and then the second chapter, I talk about how do we cultivate it.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And I mean, so it's interesting. Like the first time I saw the title on it, I was like, Ace Your Life. And I'm like, oh God, please don't tell me another person on how to go out there and like how a Tony Robbins thing. And then I started reading about you and I was like, okay, she's totally like not that person. It's just like a very catchy acronym. So I love that. And it brings us to today's subject, which is what we're going to talk about. You wrote on your blog today. And as soon as you talked about it, I was like, this is going to be our subject today. And that is what do you want to call it? Mommy guilt?
Well, so I'm calling it perpetual mother's guilt.
Yeah, perpetual
That's
mother's
what because that's what I feel like it is. It's perpetual. It's like nonstop, 24/7. We can't get away from it, can't get around it. Literally, we're like in the heaps of it all the time.
Why do you think that is?
Well, it's intrinsic in us being parents and mothers, particularly.
Yeah, because I don't know dads that walk around with daddy guilt all the time, right?
I think it depends. I think it depends on the human.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say on the level of emotion intelligence, that's the key factor, truly. And also the level of consciousness, because a lot of us live in our deep kind of unconscious and we're really not in conscious awareness. And I'm talking about women too, not just men, of course.
Right.
So the more I think we're in our subconscious and our unconscious, we're not really attuned to our thoughts and feelings. That's the truth.
So do you feel like those people have more of that guilt, or they have less because they're not in tune?
I think it depends. Again, it
Yeah.
so depends. You know what? We're so complex as human beings.
Mhm.
And you know what's so funny? Recently, I'm laughing because recently somebody said about me that I'm complicated emotionally. And I was thinking, like, yeah, again, it was somebody that, so, and I was thinking about this just the other day, and I'm like, I'm not complicated. I'm sophisticated. I was like, I'm going to prefer to see myself as sophisticated. And that's a very different perception in terms of the way one might treat me
Mhm.
and the way you may interact with me if you think of me as sophisticated rather than complicated, right?
Right. Well, I would imagine that you would be assumed to be complicated because you know your emotions. And people don't like that. When you can say, I don't like this, they don't like that. Or you can say, that doesn't make me feel good, or this is not how I do it. Then all of a sudden they're like, oh, you're difficult. No, I'm not difficult. I just know what I do and don't like.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
When you assert your needs, and yes, it gets a little complicated because not everybody's in that space. That's exactly right.
And as a mom, that brings us back to the whole the
Yes.
perpetual mommy guilt, right? Because
So,
asserting your needs. Oh,
well, so there's a lot of pieces to this. What I focus on really when I just wrote this article because I was thinking, like, what topic do I write on that hasn't been written on in parenting, and I write a lot of, I write a lot of articles on parenting. And I thought about, like, how can I really help women and parents and mothers, make decisions so that they're not riddled with guilt. And it always goes back to values.
mhm.
And I always find that the most difficult decisions to make is when we have competing values. And that is the reason why we're always guilt-ridden.
So give me like an example of that.
So I'll give you a great example. I had this client who came in. I'll never forget this because it, like, stands out in my mind so much. And it's somebody I was working with for, like, kind of a substantial period of time. And she came in and she was just besides herself. And she came in and she said, I'm so angry. My ex-husband, he knows it's my daughter's birthday. It's her 9th birthday. And the nerve, like, he calls her at 9 o'clock at night.
Mm.
Like, who does that?
Mhm.
And she was,
my ex-husband with my daughter.
but you know what? She was more disturbed. She was disturbed about the fact that her daughter was upset, of course,
Right.
but she was also disturbed at the fact that she was disturbed. In
Mm.
other words, why does he always get under my skin? And why does it still bother me? And should I expect any different from him? And why do I have to have an emotional reaction to his, absenteeism or whatever the case is? So that disturbed her too. And I looked at her and I said to her, good for you. And she was like, what? I go, good for you for being disturbed. I love your disturbance. She's like, what do you mean? And I said, like, why do you think you're so disturbed right now? So she said, because I would never do something like that. Like, that's just like bad parenting. And that's just not being caring and thoughtful. Oh. I said, isn't that something really wonderful to be disturbed over? Because it reminds you, how you are, right? And how you don't want to be, or how you do want to be, right? And it also connects you to what's important to you fundamentally.
Mhm.
I said, so you should marvel at the fact that you're such an in tune parent and such a thoughtful parent that it wouldn't even dawn on you to behave that way.
Right. And
Like,
that it disturbs you that it does, that
that's,
that person does behave that way. Yeah.
yes. And that it disturbs you to the level at which it disturbs you. Good for you. Would you actually not want to be disturbed? Like, you would be, I said, actually, if you walked in here and you weren't disturbed by that, I would be disturbed.
Yes. Yeah. I'd be disturbed that you're not disturbed
about you. I'd be
Yeah.
concerned about you.
Yeah.
So she was like, you know what? Yeah. And she starts cursing him out. And, like, she was so happy to do it. And with a smile on her face. And, like, literally it was like a weight lifted off her shoulder. She was, like, so thrilled. Right. Now, what's the competing values though? Right. Because we're always in situations where we have competing values. Okay. And the competing values tend to be, okay. So on the one hand, right, her mental health and her, emotional stability and whatever else, right. She wanted to feel that she's regulated no matter what.
Yeah.
Right.
So she doesn't want to be in that space where she feels like disturbance is out of her control.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that has to do with her value of mental health and kind of, kind of regulation, emotional regulation, and etc. Right.
She
And
should
then
let herself be that way.
that's right. Right.
Right.
And then the other piece of it is her parenting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which leads her to be disturbed. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question becomes, how do I handle this?
Mm-hmm.
Do I yell at him?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Do I say something to my daughter? What do I do with all this? So when you're able to kind of really see what you're dealing with in terms of the competing values, and she's able to say to herself, you know, like there's this piece to my emotional regulation and my kind of, right, my mood and, how I'm feeling. And then also this parenting piece, right? I could really kind of understand why I'm feeling the way that I am. And I'm not going to be okay with this situation no matter what.
Right. Seems like that in that situation, that's when you give yourself some grace, right?
Right. And there's pain and values and pain. Right.
Values.
So if your values are rubbed up against, you're going to feel pain.
Right.
Okay. Automatically. It's just the way it is. Okay. And So there's pain and values and pain. So if you feel, like I said, if you feel so you have to expect to feel disturbed. Okay. And if you feel disturbed, that means a value is being rubbed up against.
I like that though, because it makes sense, because we're constantly, especially like you said, the whole the perpetual like guilt and stuff.
Yeah.
Like in our heads about the fact that, like, you were talking about a friend having to get a divorce, and that how that then makes her feel guilty about how it's going to affect her children. I think a lot of women go through this. I think there's a lot of women who stay in relationships because they feel like if they get a divorce, that's going to hurt their children. So they would rather not live their life so that their children have a mother and a father at home.
Well, so here's where I had a patient that I was working with, and I actually I had to take it out of the article because it was too long, but I included that example. So there was a woman, exactly, she got remarried, okay, and she came in and she felt guilt over, again, how it affected her kids, exactly what you just said. And we were talking about it. And what was so interesting about it is that she recognized out of our conversation that if she would have stayed in her marriage, she would have compromised both values. Whereas she did compromise a value because the value was family,
right,
and self-preservation. Okay. So by her pursuing the divorce, right, she was leaning into both of those things, right? And what she recognized is that if she would have stayed in the relationship, okay, she would have compromised both values. Being outside of the relationship, she did compromise family, okay, but she was able to maintain her self-preservation.
Well, and it's funny because she really didn't compromise family, but that's the thought we have.
Right. Well, in terms of again, the fantasy.
The fantasy family.
Right. The fantasy family. And we recognizing that, etc. This idea that I have to be married forever and, etc. Right. This whole, how we're also socialized to believe that is what leads to our happiness and well-being and etc. Yes. Yeah. And what she recognized is she actually gave a better advantage to her kids by not being in the relationship, because now she has a very intact marriage and a very loving marriage in a situation that's not full of yelling, screaming, constant activation. Yeah. And that's actually healthier in the end for her kids.
Right. They're setting an example of how a marriage should be versus staying in a marriage just to keep the kids from having divorced parents.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So, whether it's when we have to decide as a mom, like a working mom, whether we have to do like a career activity or we have to, do a child activity, right? We're always in situations where there's two competing values. And that's what puts us in that position all the time. The other thing also is we also don't have control over most things as much as we'd like to.
Oh, yeah.
And when we see our children in pain or going through adversity, that constantly, we feel the need to control the situation, to fix it, and to make our child feel better.
Right.
Yeah. So because of all those reasons, we're constantly in the throes of guilt, constantly. But when I say guilt, that's very negative, and I don't like to think about it that way because I feel like it's not really guilt. It's in the loom of many decisions that we have to make.
It's just, it feels like it's like burden's not the right word either, right? Because our family is not a burden, our children are not a burden, but it's like this constant merry-go-round of just trying to keep everybody in a place where they're moving forward and happy, and often sacrificing ourselves. And if we choose ourselves, are we bad for choosing ourselves? Like, I know a lot of moms who have that, right? Like you were saying, I know full-time moms, a lot of my friends are full-time moms, work over 40 hours a week. And also, like me, have to go in and not have to, but chose to be like a room parent. Not like I have time to be room parent, but chose to be room parent so that my child feels like his mom's actively in school, you know, and helping out and all of these different things. It's just a lot of pressure.
It is a lot of pressure. And that's where, if you really ground it in your values, it helps you in your decision making. And you recognize, right, that you don't have to constantly feel like you're doing something wrong, or you're a bad mom or a neglectful mom, or whatever the case is. So, and I laid out in the article exactly how to do that. So I'll give you just like one example. What we tend to do when we're making decisions is we throw the baby out with the bathwater. So what does that mean? Right? We're so avoidant to the negative emotions because we feel so guilty. And so we're avoidant of it. So we almost like don't even want to recognize it or kind of tap into it. And that actually doesn't serve us well, because then we don't pay homage to the competing value. So like, let's say, and this is an example I give in the article, let's say you have to make a decision on whether you're going to do like a career, you know, kind of event or a parenting event. And that happens all the time when you're a working mom.
Right.
Sure. We're always in that situation. You know, if you recognize that you're deciding to do the career event because you have to, let's say, it doesn't mean that it's disqualifying the importance of your parenting value. It's recognizing that in that moment, in that situation, you need to lean into the career more than the parenting.
And what we do is we do the career and feel bad about being a bad parent.
Yes, that's exactly right. But if you recognize and you kind of say that to yourself, like in this moment, right? A different moment, I would decide that.
Right.
But in this particular moment, I have to decide this. Well, but then you say to yourself, but that is a really core value of mine as well. So what am I going to do to make sure that I'm tapping into that so that I am actually being an attuned mom? Well, I may have somebody record, you know, the game, or I may sit down afterwards, you know, sit down and take my kid to Starbucks and hang out and listen to them talk intently about like their experience, right? There's other ways of being attuned, and also acknowledging and expressing yourself to your child. Like, listen, this was such a hard decision for me to make. Like, I was really struggling because, you know, like there's nothing I would want more than to be there for you. And sometimes I have to make these really hard decisions, and you're going to see, like, right, sometimes you also have to make hard decisions, don't you? You know, and right.
A good teaching moment for them.
Yeah. And to say, what do you need from me? Right. I can't be there. Which I apologize for. What do you need from me to feel attuned? To feel that you're being considered by me, because you really are. Like, I'm really thinking about your needs, and I want you to know that. And I want to do something, and I want to be there for you in a way that you need for me to be. We don't do all of that when we sit with guilt, because we avoid, and we turn.
We just feel bad. We just feel like we're shitty people.
That's exactly right. I'm a bad mom. I'm a horrible bad mom.
Yeah.
That's right.
It reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen the Netflix show, Working Moms.
No.
If you haven't, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And so for all the moms out there, I recommend watching it because it's absolutely hilarious. And it kind of basically goes over exactly all of this. All the women are like, you know, working moms, and they go through all of the different emotions and all of the guilt and all of the different things. And, but anyways, but it's such a big subject. Big subject.
And it's not talked about much, I have to say. I actually did a little bit of a search because I was like thinking of topics. And I was surprised. There really isn't written. There was hardly anything written on it.
It might be a good book for you to write. And you have 4 children. So writing this article, you can obviously relate, or the blog, you can relate, but what have you gone through with the 4 children that you could teach us moms a little bit about, or maybe just tell us, so that even if it's not a teaching moment, it's a moment saying like, I've been there too.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, what comes up for me in terms of, I think people judge me sometimes. I'm going to.
Yeah. You're choosing your work over your kids.
So that's one thing, but I'm a very avid exerciser.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've been exercising for over 30 years. I'm very, very like hyper focused on my health and fitness, etc. So every morning, 6 days a week, I work out, and I do like an hour of weight training, an hour of cardio, and I'm very, die hard.
Why do they
And
judge you for that though?
because people know me and they know nothing comes between me and my workout.
Oh,
So of course, if there was events at school for my kids or whatever the case is, I would always like manage my time. Um, but the judgment was, oh, the time that you're spending, working out, you could be serving lunch at school and volunteering, or you could be whatever.
people are assholes. It's like
I'm,
the time you're taking to exercise and take care of
I'm
yourself, you
telling
could
you,
be doing this.
I'm telling you, you'd be surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big like judgment on somebody who's doing a good job taking care of themselves.
I know, but I'm just saying, I'm just saying, and I've thought about, oh my God, all the hours I spend working out, I could be doing all this other stuff too. Even, like sometimes organizing my time around like meetings and whatever the case is, like it takes priority. Of course, I still have good boundaries where, obviously if I have to reschedule my workout, I do. Like that's not a big deal at all. But people know like I'm really serious about that. And I fit that in no matter what. But so there's definitely, there could be judgments at times, working also, I think exponentially over time, since my kids now they're pretty grown. So I have increased my hours. I work less hours and now I definitely am working like full load and I come home, pretty late at night. And at times there is that mom guilt that, kind of comes in. So I really try to balance it. But, again, you have to really think about how you're attuning to your child.
Right.
I wrote a blog. This is an interesting thing. So I wrote a blog, basically when your child leaves for college, giving them a exit interview.
Mm.
And I wrote like a list of questions and a lot of them are pretty, I have to say, they're pretty in your face. Like, how do you feel like I parented you? How do you think it was how I managed you and your siblings? Like really intent questions that you leaving yourself open for some like serious criticism,
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, how else are you going to learn?
Yeah. And I have to tell you, the comments and the feedback that I got on it, people were like, I can't ask my kids this. I don't want to know this,
Why would
or
you
like,
not want to know?
or like, I don't know what they're going to say. Like, I'm scared what they're going to say. I'm like,
Right.
yeah, but like, that's our job is to face ourselves. We're asking our kids to face themselves and we
Right.
can't do that ourselves. Like, how does that work?
That's interesting because it's like we want to be such good parents, but then we don't want to be told if we didn't do something that was in their eyes a good parent.
That's right. And also when our kids hold us accountable for our parenting, sometimes it could be really hurtful. It could be really hurtful.
When you were talking about the working out thing, what came to my mind was that, somebody could be in a physical location with their child and not be present, right? But they're physically there. So I'm at a football game, but I'm on my phone, not even watching the game. So yeah, I showed up for the game, but I'm not really present in there. Whereas you could be doing something else, working out, working, whatever the case may be. But if you do what you said and you say, what is it that I can do for you? That's actually more present and aware for them than just showing up and sitting there with your phone, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say, what's amazing, which I'm so proud, is my kids reach out to me emotionally when there's something going on for them. Like, yeah.
They
And
feel safe.
that means the world to me more than anything, honestly. Because one thing that parents, I implore parents to do is to give your kids space to express themselves. I can't say that enough. And the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I mean that. Because sometimes it's really hard for us to hear certain things. And some parents would rather not even bring up how many times I hear a parent say, I don't want to know, or I'm not going to know how to handle it. And, my first book, which is Free Your Child from Overeating, it's 53 mind body strategies for lifelong health. Do you know how many parents approached me and said, I can't bring this up to my kid. It's gonna like talk things into their head, or I don't know, it's gonna embarrass them. Or, and I was like, doesn't your kid look in the mirror? Do you
Right.
think that they don't really realize what they look like and how they feel and what's going on for them?
Right. Don't you
So
want
like
to teach them good
if your
habits
child
now?
if your child had diabetes or
Right.
had any kind of medical, would you even hesitate for a moment to raise this with your child?
I
And you
think
know
the answer to that, though, I'm sorry not to interrupt you, is yes, they would hesitate because your child would not get to a place where they have diabetes if you were somebody who questioned things, right? So that's kind of like one of those situations that it's like what comes first, the chicken or the egg,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's amazing because the idea of talking things into your kids' heads,
Hmm.
by ignoring it or by not mentioning it, by not expressing yourself subliminally, what you're actually communicating is, I don't care, it
Hmm.
doesn't matter, and I don't notice you.
Hmm.
That's damaging.
Hmm.
That's
Absolutely.
damaging. Yeah.
And not asking means, like you said, it does portray you don't care, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think
And
about
that's and again, that's not necessarily the case. So I do want to say that,
of course
not,
not. It just means that
yeah,
it comes off that way, right?
it could. Yeah.
I always I think of I a lot of times in these podcasts I think of my teenager just because, she's a teenager
Yeah.
versus like my younger one, but I think about I'm always asking like, how did that feel or whatever the case may be, and sometimes she's just like, you're always asking me how I feel and how I'm doing and da 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 da, and I think she gets annoyed, but she has no idea the fact that like somebody actually asks her that is actually unusual, like that most parents don't like kind of want to really hear how the day went or tell me what you feel I did this or whatever the case may be.
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
it's less common than somebody who does it would think, I guess. Yeah.
I didn't have that when I was growing up.
Yeah, no, me neither. I guess that's why
I
I'm so
didn't.
nosy.
I, I did not have a parent ask me how I was or how I'm
Yeah.
doing or anything like that, like ever,
Is that why you got into your field? Why'd you get into your field?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of reasons, I feel like I knew it was like a calling for me, and I knew what I was always like kind of a parentified child, and I was always pseudo mature for my age, just because I went through so much. I have like a lot of intergenerational trauma. My four grandparents were Holocaust
Oh,
survivors.
geez. Yeah.
A lot, and like
A lot.
major trauma. Like we're
Yeah.
talking about concentration camps and like, I mean, just being murdered in gas chambers. And I mean,
Mm.
you can't even imagine, right? And my parents were completely traumatized. Their parents never said, I love you. I mean, I could go on and on and on. So of course it was gonna be, I mean, how could it not be, represented in their parenting? And, they divorced when I was 3, my brother was 2. My mom married, she was 18, my father was 19. They were children.
Hmm. Yeah.
They were children raising children. And I was always a parentified child. I always had this kind of pseudo maturity to me.
Hmm.
And there was a lot, throughout the years, again, well-intentioned, of course, but a lot, I would say mostly neglect than
Hmm.
anything, emotional mostly. Um, but at times which made me feel really unsafe. I was like kind of like a fish in a pond, and had no one to talk to and no one to like express my, I went to school. I went to 5 different elementary schools.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah. No one ever sat with me and did my homework or asked me how I was. A lot of people failed me. Let's put it that way.
Hmm.
I remember even meeting with a school social worker, which I was astounded that nobody did anything or said anything. Like just so much. When I think about it now, because I'm doing a lot of very deep personal work,
Hmm.
I really think like from age 9 to 11 was really the time that, incrementally, kind of impacted me the most. And I
Hmm.
think about all the people that failed me like during that time. And it's like pretty crazy.
When you,
Um,
not to interrupt you, when you talk about that kind of stuff, this is where me, like as a mom, this is where that mommy guilt comes in, right? Because if you ever hear people talk about their past, almost always
mhm,
somewhere mom did something. Like, maybe dad left. Okay, so dad left, that traumatized them. But the mom is such the center of the relationship that it
mhm.
feels like no matter what we do, somehow we're damaging them.
Well, mom and dad did something.
Right, right, right.
Or
And I
did
understand that, but I'm talking about in general.
No, but I'm saying or didn't do something,
Right.
and I have to say that, it is hard because, a lot of us, unfortunately, as moms, right, a lot of us are not cultivated. We live in our subconscious and our unconscious.
Hmm.
Like how many moms get therapy and how many moms like, really kind of do a deep dive into kind of their core wounds and their triggers, and I could go on and on. You know, some do, and I see, I mean, I love, because when I work with moms, which is so great, they come in for their own interpersonal kind of, you know, growth, but it inevitably kind of carries over and spills over into their parenting. And I spend a lot of time with them, and they come to me after a while because they're like, oh my goodness, I notice how like this is impacting my parenting. Like, could you help me with this too? I'm like, of course. And it's an amazing transformation that I see in their parenting when they really do a deep dive into kind of, and self-awareness in their own kind of needs and etc. So we have to go through that process. We can't effectively parent unless we really understand ourselves, because it spills over. It just does.
Yeah, there's no way that it doesn't.
No. And I had an
don't know any
incident.
better.
That's right. I had an incident, you know, because I'm obviously in my own therapy, and I'm doing my own EMDR, which I also do EMDR. But you know, the therapist said to me, like, is there something that kind of triggered you this past week? And I was thinking, and I was like, wow, you know what? My daughter, she's 14 and teenager, like,
Yep, I get it.
yes. And she was just very, what was she? She was moody. And she was very rejecting in a very hurtful way, really hurtful. And I recognize that when she rejects me and when she's hurtful, the first thing that comes up for me right away is to be rejecting back to her.
So you want to do to her what she did to you.
Well, it's very subconscious. I don't do it,
like you're intentionally, obviously you're not going to do it intentionally, but
no, but I get icy. I get icy.
Yeah.
I get really icy. I get like, I feel it. I feel it in my body. I become like extremely like kind of like cut off. You know, I become facially, and in terms of like facially,
a wall goes up, it seems like. Yeah.
A wall goes up, and I don't want to interact, and I want to just like kind of disconnect.
Because she hurt you.
You know? And there's a part of me in some respects, which I'm very in tune of, that's why I don't act it out, that I become a little bit sadistic, where I'm like, I want to hurt her back, you know, like, you hurt me, like, I'm going to hurt you back. And that's, again, that's a very like primal adolescent kind of core wound issue. You know what I mean?
But the awareness of it means that you're aware and you're working on yourself and stuff like that. So the difference would be if you weren't aware of that and then acted out on it. Yeah.
Exactly. And a lot of us do. And by the way, I'm not perfect. There are times I do act out, and I, you know, and I'll have to go like kind of circle back and apologize to her and say, you know what, like, I realized that really hurt me. And this feeling kind of came over me, and I am so sorry. That wasn't, you know, that wasn't okay. That wasn't okay. And I'll explain like what happened, and, you know, what I could have done better, and, you know, all of that. But it does. I'm a human, right?
Yeah. Right. And that's kind of where I was going to go with the next thing, is that I think that we forget we're human and we're going to make mistakes. And so we put ourselves like on this place where we're a mom, so we're not allowed to make any mistakes. And the fact of the matter is we're still just trying to figure out our own life. So now we're trying to help somebody, you know, learn about their life while we are still trying to figure out about our own life. And it's like a constant learning thing. It doesn't matter if I'm 43, 22, 59, 70, we're always learning. Right. And so it's like, we can't be perfect because we're continually going through our own process.
Yeah.
As we're trying to help them.
That totally. And I know for myself, like lately, like I would say even in the past couple of years, just because of my own journey, I have been so much more keen and aware of tuning into, you know, and being accountable for my stuff.
Yeah.
And I am, again, like in the past, and I'm admitting this, like, it was hard for me to admit I was wrong. It was hard for me to face myself and to really take accountability for my stuff, because it was hard to say that I was rejecting, or it was hard to say that I have these flaws, and whatever the case is, because a part of me needs to be like perfect and okay, you know? And now I don't have a problem with admitting like when I messed up, and I don't have a problem with saying like it wasn't okay, you know?
Well, and then that comes with the emotional intelligence, though. Again, that's working on everything.
Yeah. So I can't say enough, like, it's important to work on yourself so that you could effectively in tune with your kids. Like, that's just so critical to the development of, you know, both yourself and your kids.
So as a mom, if I'm like sitting there and let's go back to the situation where I have to choose between work and my kids, which is literally all the time, right? And
Yes.
well,
Yes.
one, just phrasing it that way, choosing between work and kids is putting in my mind that I'm choosing when I'm not really choosing, because it's
But,
making a decision to be here versus there. That's all it really is, right? Like, and at that point, which one is needed more, I guess would be the case.
yes. And if you recognize that they're both formative values, again,
Mhm.
if you go back to that, right? These are two very, very critical values. So if there's pain and values and pain, you're going to walk away from that situation not feeling okay.
Right. Somewhere. So I either feel like I failed my work or I feel like I failed my kids.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you could be proud of that.
Because I
That's
have value in both.
exactly. That's
Interesting.
where the magic comes in.
I guess I'd be a
Literally.
sociopath if I didn't feel bad.
Well, but that's exactly, but you could be proud. And I mean
Right.
that.
Yeah.
That's where the magic, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
That's interesting to look at it that way, because of the fact that I feel bothered by the fact that I feel like I'm choosing one between the other. I actually should be proud, because it means that I value both.
That's right. And I have to tell you, that has been life transforming for me.
Yeah. I mean,
It
I'm just
really
sitting here
has
going
been
through that right now. Like, yeah.
and to recognize it's a moment in time. We
Mhm.
can't cancel out our values. Just because we're deciding one over the other in a given moment
Mhm.
doesn't mean it's less or more important.
Right.
We can't cancel
And the
them.
fact that that it's interesting to even think about it that way. So like I continue to go on it over it in my mind, like,
Yeah.
because I feel bad means that I
Yes.
value both. And it's
And
such a weird
and I'm
thought, but it's so true.
and I'm proud that I'm disturbed. I
Yeah.
literally, when I get disturbed, I literally sit there and I'm like, what value is this rubbing up against? I
Right.
really do. I sit and think about that. And I'm like, good for me.
Yeah.
Go girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
And
weird way of looking at it. I like it though.
it's weird, but it freaking works.
Yeah. Yeah. When I say it's weird, it's just so not what we were taught.
I know, but it's magical. I have to tell you, it's magical.
And I'm going to sit
Yeah.
with this one every time I feel like I feel guilty. So I feel like it's a guilt thing, right? So whether it's over my kids or not, anytime I feel guilty over something, I'm going to have to sit with it and think like, what value is it rubbing up against? It's so
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what I do sometimes, if it's really kind of dysregulating, I'll sit and meditate on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll add the self-compassion piece.
Mm-hmm.
Like, gosh, it's so hard for me to be in this position and have to decide,
Mm-hmm.
right, in this given moment,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm going to focus on, because both of them are so important. And you
Right.
know what? Like, as a mom, I'm constantly in situations like this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really hard for me. This is really hard for me because I really love my child so much. And I really love the work that I do. I'm so
Mm-hmm.
proud of myself, and it's hard when these competing values come up and I have to make a decision that makes me feel sad. This is really hard. Right. And I could give myself a hug, and I could say, like, yeah, like compassion for the working mom, you know?
As I'm going through like literally situations in my mind, and I'm thinking, if I could just look at it that way, I feel like a lot of the guilt that I do carry
Mhm.
would, like you said, have compassion for the fact that you have the guilt. It's like so interesting.
But I have to tell you, Barbie, what's crazy is I don't feel guilt.
Right. Because now you're
I,
understanding. Yeah.
no. I feel the opposite. I feel proud of myself.
You feel proud of yourself.
I feel empowered. It's the
Right.
opposite.
Right.
I don't feel guilt. The guilt has vanished.
But I think that also is like a process, right? Because initially you're
Sure.
still going to feel, because I'm thinking like, I'm still going to feel guilty about both. And I'm still going to feel guilty about the one that I didn't go to. Like, let's say it's an
Well,
event
but
or
it's
something
not
like
guilt.
that.
But it's not guilt. It's sadness.
It's sadness. You're right. But it feels like the way that we're taught guilt feels like, right? But it's sadness. It's sadness because you're not able to do this one when you want to do this one, and you also want to do this one.
This is the difference between sadness and guilt.
Okay.
Sadness is, I'm really sad I can't be there for my child.
Hmm.
Guilt is, I'm a horrible mom for not being there for my child.
Right.
That's very different.
Well, but I think the moms, we tell ourselves, I'm a horrible mom. And we really need to recognize it's actually sadness that we can't be there. That's interesting too.
Yeah. And guess what? Guess what you do with sadness?
Mm-hmm.
With guilt, you beat yourself up.
Mm-hmm. With
Like
sadness, you have compassion.
You take a bat and you plummet yourself
Mhm.
and you feel like crap.
Mhm.
Okay.
And that's what we do, right? We beat the shit
Yeah.
out of ourselves. Like, oh, you're
Yeah,
such a bad mom.
exactly.
Yeah.
But guess what? With sadness, you know what I'll do with sadness? I'll have self-compassion.
Yep.
I will be so attuned to my kid and I will love them and I will attune to them because I'm sad.
Mhm.
And that's a big difference. Huge.
And them seeing that you're sad that you don't get to be there shows them how much you did want to go.
That's exactly right. And guess what? Adversity, resilience. Like kids have to learn coping skills.
Mhm.
Things don't always work out the way we want them to.
Mhm.
And they're gonna make decisions in their life, and they're actually making decisions in their lives now that speak to what we're talking about. I mean, how many times this happened actually with my daughter just this past week? So they called her, somebody called her to babysit for a babysitting job.
Mhm.
Well, she already committed to having plans with her friends,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So she was in this quandary, same
Right.
thing.
Right.
She was in a quandary. Do I babysit because they want me and I feel bad because like they need me, you know, and I also want the extra money because I need it. And
Right.
or I committed to my friends. What do I do?
Right.
Right.
Do
And
I turn down this babysitting job when I really want the money?
she was in this quandary.
What
And
did she choose?
I used that example with her.
Yeah.
That's a really hard decision to make because you have competing values.
Yes.
I did say that to
I
her.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And she decided to babysit actually.
And then did she process it the way that you're talking about?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. And she said, I'm such a good, I'm upset because I'm such a good friend and I don't want to disappoint my friends. And I am a loyal friend who, when I say something, right, I like to follow through and not to disappoint.
Mhm.
And she was able to tap into that. And she was proud of herself for being the loyal friend that she is.
Interesting. It's such a different way.
And
I
she
wish they would
spoke
teach
to
this to people in
and she
school.
spoke to her friends that way, which was so cool. She said to them, gosh, I want you to know this is really hard for me because I'm such a loyal friend and I always want to follow through and I never want to disappoint, like when I kind of commit to something. So this is making me feel really horrible, you know, but I also want you to know, like, this is important because they really need me. They don't have anybody else to babysit. They would be left without anybody. And I could really use the money, you know. It's okay for you to have feelings about it.
Right.
Like, and I'm happy to hear your feelings about it.
Yeah.
You know, right?
Right.
You know, but could you also understand, you know, kind of where I'm coming from? Is that okay for you to understand that too?
Right.
And guess what her friend said? I am disappointed that you can't make it, but I do understand.
Yeah. And now she's not making up a lie.
That's right.
Right. Because a lot of times what people do is oh, I'm sick. And then they go babysit. Right.
Yes. But the beautiful thing is like that they were able to communicate, like the friend felt safe enough to say, I am disappointed, right? And then was able to say, but like, I understand. And then she was able to sit with the fact that her friend was disappointed in her because that's life.
Right.
And that she could still do something and meet her needs.
Right.
I mean, major lessons there all over the place.
All over the place. Like I'm sitting here just thinking of all kinds of different situations. There's situations where I say that I'm sick and I'm not sick because there's two things I have to do. And I signed up for one thing here. And then I'm like, oh shoot, I need to do this here. And then I tell somebody I'm sick and I'm not really sick. And so now this is like a completely different, and I always feel guilty, right? Because you're lying. So it's interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the crux of my blog. And I forgot how it came up, but I was like talking to a friend and I said, you know what, this would really help moms. I should write something.
It really would. Like it's just, I think it's the acknowledging that the reason why we feel bad is that we're sad, not guilty. And that, I mean, it is what it is.
There's competing values.
There's competing values. Yeah.
Yeah.
That the reason why we feel bad is because there's competing values. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's true. You look at it. Yeah.
And we're always in situations like that all the time. Yeah. And it's such a more empowering, self-compassionate kind of way of looking at things.
It is. In the beginning of our time together, and you're saying competing values, I'm like, I don't know what the heck she's talking about. Right. And then like, as we sit there and continue to go over scenarios, I'm like, I get why you would say it's competing values. Yeah. Because I kind of thought it was hogwash in the beginning. But I get it now. I get it because I feel like
I'm gonna challenge you then to read my book.
I'm gonna have to now. Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of what I'm saying is really changing. I mean, and is really changing your mindset in terms of how you function and how you relate to yourself and others, and in terms of the frame of acceptance, compassion, empowerment. So all the things I'm telling you right now, it helps to shift so that you're relating to things and people and yourself differently in terms of stuckness. So it really helps with any kind of stuckness. When I wrote the book, it was very interesting when I was, kind of going from obviously to publisher, one of the feedback that I got, which was kind of upsetting, was you need to write on a certain population and to say who this is going to help. And I said, no, this is a framework.
Yeah.
This is a framework that helps you in any kind of stuckness.
They wanted you to identify a customer, basically, right?
Yeah. Well, because of marketing, but I'm just saying, but it's a framework,
right?
It's a
Just
way
for
that
life.
you walk and talk and live, which is much different,
right? Because it's the way life is. It's not just to, let me tell you how to do this XYZ. Yeah,
exactly.
So interesting. You had a TED Talk.
I did, yes.
So one, I'm just interested as a human, how that experience was for you. And then two, what did you talk about on that they found so valuable to put you on a TED Talk?
Yeah. So it was circumventing emotional avoidance. Again, I think for what I write about in all my writing, it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
I would imagine.
Even harder than giving birth. Not kidding. I had to memorize 10 pages. At my age, not easy to do.
Right.
And I just have a really bad memory in general. So it was so hard. It was really challenging, I have to say. But it was like one of those things that I'm so proud that I did it. And I felt, it was an amazing experience, and I will never do it again. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm happy I did it. And it's really about like how our minds, neurologically, biologically, physiologically is formed in terms of, really impacting on why we avoid negative emotions, and also how we're socialized and all the factors and barriers that keep us in emotional avoidance.
Right.
And also, teaching people to really kind of lean into their negative emotions, obviously to live a fulfilling life, because we need our full spectrum of emotions, because it does remind us of what's truly important to us. And we really need every single emotion. We can't disregard any emotion. And when we're disregarding parts of ourselves, we're disregarding all of ourselves. So I do want to say that we can't demonize parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
And we do that all the time.
All the time. Well, we're taught to do that. I mean, how many people, it makes me so mad when they call kids bad. You're a bad boy. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go over there and you're a bad boy. Yeah. I mean, that's so hard because they start us doing that when we're so young. That kind of leads us into, so not accepting, demonizing yourself and covering up emotion, then leads me into the part where I wanted to talk about the fentanyl use and the teens, and that you have been working on discussing that in some of your blogs and stuff. Can you talk to me about, I mean, it's such a big epidemic right now. So, I mean, it's just crazy how many kids are dying.
People don't know about it.
They don't know about the fentanyl problem?
I'm not being scary.
People don't know. I'm sorry. You're telling me don't know about the fentanyl problem.
People don't. I'm not kidding. If you read the newspaper and if you listen to social media, you may know about it. Most people don't. When I talk about it, people are like, huh? They're astonished. Literally. Can I tell you, this year alone? Okay. I just met with a 20-something-year-old college age. She just graduated. Her brother just died of fentanyl poisoning in California. I have a patient that I was seeing for years. Okay. He came in because of anxiety. His high school senior, one time experimented as a high school senior with pills. He was the only one out of his friend group. Okay. At the scene where they took the pills, one kid got sick. The police came. He went in the ambulance. Okay. Went to the hospital. They figured out it was fentanyl poisoning. The other kids went home, and this kid never woke up. So it was the parents that picked up their kids. It was the police. It was hospital administration. Nobody informed the parents. This kid could have been saved. I mean, mind-blowing. And the saddest thing about this is this patient happened to have a brother who died of an overdose while he was growing up, and his worst fear
Came through. Yeah.
came true with one of his children and his only son.
Well, and don't you feel like it's danger? This one particular drug is extremely dangerous because, in my opinion, it is being hidden in other things that people don't know. So it's not like they're smoking, something, or they're injecting something in their veins. It's being hidden in things that should look like and do look like
Everything.
prescription medication, or whatever. It's in so many things that's why it's so dangerous.
And also the how lethal it is.
Yes,
So I would
because
say
it's
that
such a
it
tiny
takes
dose.
a very small a dose for it to be lethal, and
Yeah.
that's what makes it so much different also.
So
But there isn't an education, and I could tell you, I speak to kids all the time. They're not learning about it. They're not learning about it. I'm not even kidding. Like let me tell you, I drive my kids crazy. Like I literally talk about it all the time. When there's a case, I show them. I'm like, look,
you're that mother. I'm that mother too. It's like,
I
here, let me
am.
show you.
I am. And I say to them, I said, you want to drink? You want to smoke pot? Fine. But like, no pills, no hard drugs, like whatever. Like this is where people die. Like, and I tell them, like, I'm not a big proponent like of drugs in general, but I'm like, if you have to do something,
Right.
do it safely, and they tell me about it. They talk to me about it.
But it's in like things that look like candy. Like people wouldn't even think that they're doing a drug.
Well, they do. And now they found it also in prescription drugs.
Right. That's what I was saying. Like I just read an article that they found it in prescription drugs because it's cheaper to use fentanyl than it is to use
they also get people hooked on it. That's part of the ploy also. They're getting people hooked on it so that they come back for more. And that's part of, the crazy, drug cartel and whatever else. But, there's so many reasons why it's out there, but people are not informed. And I could tell you, people have the attitude, it's not going to happen to me,
so
or
silly. That attitude with this drug is so silly.
It's not going to happen to my kid. I'm telling you, it's such a travesty. And I could tell you, like in the schools, okay, I speak to kids. They're not talking about it as much as they should. I'm telling you, it's really scary.
I feel like that's somewhat of a depending on where you live. So I'm in California, right? I'm in Orange County. And like, I think it's tonight at 6:00. There's like something at the school is doing a Zoom call on fentanyl. So I feel like our area is really educating the kids and the parents and stuff like that. However, that being said, I feel like you said, most areas are not. They're not. It might be because we're so, we're California, we're so close to all the drug cartels. I don't know, but I mean, it's ridiculous. There's kids who die all the time.
Like I said, I've spoken to a number of kids and
they don't know.
They do these FDC, programs, this drug and alcohol training programs. You know what else they don't talk about? Suicidality. They don't talk about that either. They do not talk about that. Do you know how many clients I've had in my practice? I have 2 or 3 this year. They found their best friends. They found their best friends at college. Yep. And it's happening at colleges at rates you cannot even imagine. And guess what? It's hidden because nobody wants to talk about it. And I hear about it from my clients.
Right.
I hear about it from my clients, and I'm working with my clients because they're traumatized because they've kind of walked in on their friend, hanging themselves. And another.
Do you think that's because of the stress and pressure that we now put on people?
There's so many issues now.
There's just so many.
There's so many issues. I think that, and I wrote an article on social emotional learning and what we need to do to really like tackle it at schools and otherwise. It takes such a comprehensive approach to our children's mental health, and we don't need anything more than to go beyond the statistics. There's the rate of emergency room visits are up, the rate of deaths are up, the rate of, mental health, even, medication use and everything is up. We don't need any more proof that our children are suffering. It's blatant. It's blatant. What is being done about it? And then on top of it, which is unconscionable, they're scared to go to school.
Right, because they're getting shot. Yes. It's ridiculous. Yep, I agree. I mean, we've
We're not
had,
we're talking about physical safety.
no, I know, I understand. Yeah. Well, in our, like in our community, and granted, so I'm going to start with this, and this is not me like trying to like quote unquote brag, but in our community, we're in a higher end community. So, supposedly things are supposed to be safer and this and that. In this last year, we have had one teacher who was arrested because they were sexting photos to children, at the children meaning high school kids, right? Like ninth graders. One teacher who was arrested because they had put a camera in the girls' bathroom. Oh no, it was like a joint bathroom where they were changing and stuff like that. There's been, I think, at least 3 times that school's been canceled because there's been warnings about shootings. And I don't know how your time is, but there's been warnings about shootings. And I'm like, these are things that we used to be told happened in, socioeconomic classes that were lower income and things like that. And so nobody cared back then, by the way, because they thought, oh, it only happens to these people, right? So
That's
I do think that there's a lot more awareness now because it's happening to people who have a bigger voice. But it's sad that they can't even, this is what bugged me. And I know I'm not like speaking in full sentences because it's so hard to get through these things. This is what bugged me. When my daughter's school had a warning last week, it was that there was going to be a quote unquote shooting that somebody had put on, TikTok or something like that. She is just going to school. It doesn't faze her anymore because there's so much of this stuff going on that it's just like, like it is what it is at this point. It's so crazy. And that it does faze them.
Okay.
It's just,
so here's the thing, right? This is when we're talking about physiologically, and this is really what we really have to think about. Our nervous system, okay, our autonomic nervous system, and specifically our sympathetic nervous system, gets impacted by this.
right. Even though we don't think it does. Yeah.
Whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
Okay. Just because we're repressing it, or we're disassociating from it, or we're disconnecting from it, or we're shutting off from it, doesn't mean it's not absorbing into our nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? Cortisol levels.
Mm-hmm.
When you have escalated cortisol levels, it affects your health outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, we can't just say, oh, because, the kid looks okay, and they're functioning okay, that they're okay. No, it doesn't work that way. This is constant stress on the body and the mind, constant. When you're getting, every single time you're getting these alerts, and every single time you're getting these things, it is affecting the nervous system.
It's affecting everybody, right? So it's like affecting the kids, but we also forget as a parent, it's affecting us because now we're sending our children to school and, supposedly it's okay. We get emails. Okay, well, it was just a false alarm. Supposedly it was okay, whatever the case may be, but we are going through this. How do we, I guess, like, because we're going to have to wrap things up. Obviously, you don't need to live with me all day long talking, but there's only so much we can do, right? We can all try to do as much as we can do, but that really starts with ourselves, and it starts with what influence we have. So as a parent, because we kind of started this off as a parent, how do we talk to ourselves and talk to our kids so that we acknowledge what's going on? We give a space for compassion and all of that stuff, right? And I don't know what else we do. Tell me, like, I mean, I'm not asking you to solve the world's problem, but what do we do?
I wish I could.
Right?
It's really, like you said, it's giving space, for all the thoughts and feelings to come up. When we disconnect from it and we repress it and it goes into our deep subconscious, that's when it affects our functioning, and that's when it affects our physiology.
And that's why we have all these mental health issues.
Yeah, we have to process. I can't say that enough. If you look also, like, in today's society, there's a lot of research actually done now on psilocybin and like psychedelics, whatever now, and a lot of people have a lot of mixed feelings about it. But if you think about the nuance behind it, and that's the only reason I'm mentioning it, is because it literally changes our neural networks, right? And it changes the mechanism by which we go into kind of, automatic kind of behaviors and ways of thinking and perpetuating behaviors, right?
It disrupts that.
Yeah, it does. And it allows for more kind of expansion, let's say, right? Because we're forced to give up control. Our bodies are forced to just kind of relent and give up control. Now, there isn't any other way of doing that, right? So even, and again, I do EMDR and, CBT and a whole bunch of different types of treatments, and all of them are highly effective. My point is, we don't realize how things get absorbed in our bodies.
Right. And so the
They do.
psychedelics open up all of that, and you have to face
Yeah,
it.
the neural pathways, right? So the point that I'm making is that it takes such extremes,
Yes.
to change our neural pathways, because they become so integrated and embedded. And I could tell you, I fight every day of my life not to repeat behaviors based on my adaptations from childhood. And I'm not kidding. Literally every single day.
Yeah, every day.
Every single moment of every single day, if I get triggered or if I whatever, what does that tell you? It becomes seeped into literally your body. Okay. I'm 52 years old. These are things that happened to me when I was 9 and 10 years old.
Right. Well, it's why I named the podcast Mental Health, because I feel like we're in this constant, and it's not, you can enjoy life, but you are really literally unraveling like things constantly. Yeah.
So when you're talking about the stress, when you're talking about the stress, like the parenting stress that you just mentioned, you have to realize again that you're making associations, you're getting triggered, you're activated emotionally, you're activated in your body, your brain synapses. I mean, think about all the stuff that's going on during those moments. And I'm saying moment by moment. So if you could, again, the more that you have self-awareness, the more that you understand your subconscious and unconscious, the more that you're able to be in present moment awareness. Okay, all of those things. And the more you're able to attune to yourself and your relationships and your children, and integrate, like I said, the self-compassion and the acceptance and all the things that I'm talking about, that's actually living in the present moment and living your best life.
Right. I think of so many people.
A lot of practice.
It does, right? So everything that you're saying, that I do this work, right? So I get it. And then I think about like so many people who are probably listening going, well, it's easier just to drink a glass of wine. You know what I mean? Because then at least it goes away for the moment. Now I don't drink because I don't, it's not good for me. But that being said, I used to, and that was exactly it, right? It was like, it was easier just to have a glass of wine than sit here and process all of these emotions. It wasn't easier long run, but sure, it was easier in the moment.
It's a Band-Aid.
It is
all those things, whether it's overeating or drinking or smoking or whatever, we do all these adaptations, right? These, and they help in the moment, but they're very temporary, and they don't lead to our growth over time, so right. And I think about, I really ask this question: is the behavior or the action you're taking, is it contributing to your confidence or taking away from it? Is it contributing to your growth or is taking away from it? Right? If you're not going through the process, if you're not experiencing growth, what's the point? You're just remaining stagnant and you're not really evolving and changing. And part of life is evolving and changing. And we have no control. I can't say this enough. Life is full of human suffering. Okay? Every person on this planet, it's part of our humanism is to suffer. That's what we go through. Everybody has adversity in their lives. And we have limited control over our lives as much as we'd like to think we do.
Right.
So we have to learn and cope and be able to roll with the punches, and the only way to do that is to roll with the punches. Yeah.
And your book, I'm assuming, gives tools for this.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what it's all about. It's really the framework by which I teach my clients. And the beauty of it is it's a lingo, right? So like I just earlier today, I was talking to a high schooler, and she was like, I was thinking about my values. And I realized that if I was going to act like that towards my friend, it was going to rub up against that value. I was like, I wanted to hug her. I'm like,
right. You're like, boom, there it is.
Yeah. It was so on point.
Yeah.
And then she acted on behalf of her value and she felt so proud of herself. And I was like, yes, that's the way it is. And she said to me, I feel proud of myself and I know who I am. And I feel really grounded in who I am. And oh my goodness, like,
did you tell her she knows who she is for about 2 minutes until the next thing changes?
I know, but for such a young
that acknowledgement, yes.
but to have that foundation,
Mhm.
by which, again,
She
to kind of
acknowledges and knows.
extrapolate those skills and go on with her life.
Mhm.
And I have
She's
seen it.
using the tools. She's using the
I
tools.
mean, and the
Mhm.
lingo, which is so cool.
Mhm.
It's so cool to hear the lingo.
So Dr. Michelle Maidenberg,
Yeah.
and give us your website,
Sure.
and then your book again.
Yes. So it's michellemaidenberg.com, which is with 2 L's, and it's Maidenberg.
Mhm.
And the 2 books, one is my newest book is Ace Your Life, Unleash. I love the cover. Unleash your best self and live the life you want. And again, it's predicated under acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. And then my older book is Free Your Child from Overeating, and it's 53 mind-body strategies for lifelong health. I'm a Psychology Today blogger, so I write tons and tons of blogs on all different topics, and all my blogs are also on my website. And then I also have a YouTube channel where I do weekly guided meditations.
Ooh, love that.
Yeah, on all different topics. So I've been doing that as well. And then I also have a nonprofit, which is really important to me. It's called Through My Eyes, THRU,
Mhm.
and it offers free clinically guided videotaping for chronically medically ill individuals who want to leave a video legacy for their children and loved ones.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've been doing,
Wow.
I did over 300 videotapes.
That brings
Uh,
tears to my eyes even thinking about that.
Yeah, really meaningful. Really, really meaningful. And we're looking right now, I'm restructuring, the nonprofit, and I am looking for any help, literally any help. I really want it to be more widespread. I want it to be offered to people of all different socioeconomic status, location, etc., because it's been so therapeutic for so many people. And I am willing to partner and anything, honestly.
Right.
I just
Hopefully
really
that
want
somebody
to
hears this and was like,
Yeah,
yep, that's something I can help with.
yeah, I hope so. I really do.
We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It was so nice meeting you and talking with you.
Yeah, I'm going to be going, does that rub up against my value? Yep, damn it, it sure does.
I'm gonna be a little birdie. I'm gonna be a little birdie.
Right? I'm going to have to get a tattoo or something. Mm-hmm.